Hello, and welcome to Agents of Impact, a podcast from Impact Alpha. This is another in our series of conversations with agents of impact across the landscape of impact investing, sustainable finance, venture capital, private equity, and of course, founders and entrepreneurs. I'm David Bank, editor and CEO of Impact Alpha, and I'm joined by my co-host Sherelle Dorsey, a contributing editor to Impact Alpha. Hi, Sherelle.
Hey, David. I'm really looking forward to your conversation with Skya Ducheneaux.
Yeah, I sat down with her in person at a conference, actually in Hawaii, on regenerative agriculture, and I was fascinated by what they're doing at Akiptan. And Skya has essentially running a community development financial institution out of South Dakota, but they lend all over Indian country, as she says, and they're all sort of regenerative food projects. There's a lot of sort of sustainable cattle, but also somebody's making a kind of kombucha. So some of it is food products, some of it is production, and she just had a very winning way of talking about the way that they've sort of opened up access to capital for Indigenous entrepreneurs.
Well, you had me at kombucha, David. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode.
Let's do that. Before we get there, let me just remind listeners that you can see all of our shows on the Impact Alpha podcasting network at impactalpha.com. And while you're there, make sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter, Impact Alpha Open. Or go all in and subscribe to Impact Alpha and get our daily brief in your inbox each morning and our many other cool features. And make sure to subscribe to Impact Alpha on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm here with Skya Ducheneaux from Akiptan in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. Welcome, Skya. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here in beautiful Hawaii.
Akiptan is a community lender, technically a community development financial institution, or CDFI. So tell us what you do.
So I am very fortunate to get to run Akiptan. We're a native CDFI, like you said, and we're a little unique in the fact that we only finance native agriculture operations. And while we're based in Eagle Butte, South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Res, we lend nationwide all across Indian country to different native ag producers. So we work with livestock producers, fisheries, value-added producers, farmers, all sorts of people.
So you spotted a kind of financing gap for those kinds of producers. Just tell us a little bit about the history.
Yeah, so Akiptan came from the Intertribal Agriculture Council. IAC's been around since 1987, and they connect native producers with the resources they need to succeed. IAC saw that there was a huge gap and frustration with traditional capital and native agriculture. So, they said enough is enough, and they turned their frustrations into the idea of this CDFI that was built by native producers for native producers. And that's how Akiptan came to fruition, to just build that bridge that financial gap.
So you said the producers are ranchers, farmers, also food producers of various sorts. I don't know, is there an example or two that you like?
Yeah. So a lot of native agriculture is livestock production. So we do a lot of livestock production, a lot of ranchers out on the open prairie, grazing their cattle on the prairie. So we've got that. And then we've also got really cool value-added operations. We have one lady, she forages for different traditional foods and then makes a kombucha out of that. And then she sells that, which is really cool and exciting to support. We have another food producer in Bend, Oregon. Her name is Spring, and she runs Sakari Farms. She grows a lot of produce and a lot of traditional foods, and she will sell it as produce, but she also has a whole value-added line where she makes teas, like herbal teas and healing teas, and she does smoked salts. She has the best hot sauces, and she teaches seed saving, and she donates so much food to the local tribe, and she makes sure to really give back. And so we get to support operations that are small, that are larger, that are on production, that are on value-added, retail, anything native ag, who we get to work with.
And you said that there was sort of enough was enough, and folks were not being able to find the kind of lenders that they needed or the kind of capital that they needed. What was the disconnect really? Or what is the disconnect?
So a lot of it is around land and land ownership, and unless we want to be here for 8 hours, the short version is a lot of times Native producers don't get to own land. And when you don't get to own the land that you are operating on for forever, you don't get to put it on your balance sheet. So you don't ever get to leverage your largest asset. And when you can't leverage your largest asset, you don't get fair and patient financing terms, and you get stuck in this cycle of barely surviving and never getting a chance to thrive. And so I think that's what makes us different, is we understand, the nuances around land issues. We understand the years of disinvestment that have Indian country behind and helping to kind of catch that up. And we understand the little caveats about Indian country, and because we're built by Native producers for Native producers, and all my staff are tied in agriculture still somehow to this day, we get to specifically curate solutions to help fill those gaps because it's our lived experiences too.
We were talking earlier about kind of trust-based lending and the ways that you've built trust. Tell us a little bit about how that has worked.
Yeah, watching the relationships with our borrowers flourish is the most rewarding and best part of my job. So there's a very innate distrust between Native producers and financial institutions, and it goes back decades just because of all the mistreatment. And while we are built by and for Native producers, we're still a financial institution, so there's still like that innate distrust. And we are very intentional about our relationship building, and we beat down those walls until we're really good friends with everybody. And, we know who has a senior graduating high school that year. We know who has a sick elderly grandmother that they also have to take care of. We know really intimate and family details about our producers because they open up to us and they trust us. They come to us with wild ideas, and we help them run numbers, and they walk into our doors with a smile, and nobody walks into a bank with a smile, but people walk into our doors with a smile.
And they walk out with a smile too?
And out with a smile, yes. And because we're so intentionally different about how we operate, and when our producers come in to make payments, that's even a fun process and exchange. We have really cool swag we give out, but you only get it when you make a payment. And they always want it at closing, and I'm like, no, you make a payment, and you can have whatever you want. And so they come into the office, and they slap a check on the table, and then they just march over to the wall, and they get whatever they want. And they're excited to make a payment because it's a give and a take. It's not just a take. And extractive financing leads to extractive practices, and it leads to just poor quality of life, stressed cash flows, and extractive practices on the land and just depleted resources. And so we make sure that we have patient capital that feeds all aspects of the borrower so that we're not extractive with them, and they recognize that, and that's how that relationship and that trust grows. I
imagine that kind of legacy financial institutions or lenders might say, there's some kind of higher risk or something, or people aren't going to pay back their loans. Have you found that to be the case, or how do you deal with the risk question?
We are going to be here for 8 hours. So there's a risk in not doing financing how we're doing it. There's a risk in not doing it regeneratively. Our default rate is next to zero. It's incredibly low. And because we're intentional with our relationship building, we get to be more proactive versus reactive with our producers. And so that helps to also have us be successful. And our numbers speak for themselves, and our success stories, the anecdotes speak for themselves. But the one thing that I'm probably most proud of is we take clients from traditional financial institutions all the time. And people are like, can you refinance my debt? I need to get away from these guys. No one has ever refinanced our debt. We take clients. No one's ever taken one of our clients. Like, no one has wanted to leave because they just appreciate how we do things. And I think that is the testament to how successful we are.
Nice. You mentioned regenerative. Is there something about native food producers that is better for the land, better for the environment? Is there an advantage there, actually?
Yeah, so this is like one of my favorite questions, because native agriculture is just regenerative by nature. There is something born and ingrained to all of our producers and our owners that if you take care of the land's going to take care of you. And it just is. It's not something you have to learn. It's not something you necessarily need to be taught to a certain degree, but it just is, and it's the norm and it's the expectation. And I forget that that's not the norm outside of Indian country. And so, yeah, like I said, native agriculture is just regenerative by nature.
And now that consumers are moving in that direction, that's what could seem to be a competitive advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the story of the food and the whole history of that goes along with it.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and well, just earlier today at lunch, I was visiting with a gal I just met, and she was asking, so what kind of cows do you have, and how do they graze? And I was like, let me show you a picture of where my cows graze, and it's just wide open spaces and prairie for as far as the eye can see, and then she was like, well, is that all grazed properly? And I was like, rotational grazing, yes, and I was explaining how all of these things are just the norm to us, and it's the norm to us growing up, and it's hard for me to understand how that's not the norm everywhere, because it's just, we don't know any different in Indian country. And so I'm really happy to see all the recent support around native agriculture and investment in those kind of areas.
Here's an interesting question: women and women borrowers. Do you find that you have a particular focus on women, or are there stories of women borrowers that you can share? Yeah,
so that's another unintentional effort that just is. Native cultures, by and large, are very maternal and matriarchal, and so a lot of our loans go to women operators, or it's a husband and wife where the wife is just as involved, where it's equal 50-50. So there's a lot of women in agriculture in our portfolio, and then there's a lot of just women-owned businesses in our portfolio as well. Our staff, we're a staff of 9, and there's 8 women. Yeah, and so, and it's not something that we had to ever intentionally put an effort on, because again, it just is in Indian country, you know what I mean? I was raised around a lot of men, and it didn't matter that I was a girl. They're you can do the same things, you can have the same opportunities as we have, and so how I grew up is very different than how the rest of the world operates, and so it's walking two worlds.
So last question, what does Akiptan need to thrive and grow?
Oh gosh. We capital, because that's our bread and butter of what we do, right? And so last year we closed just under 10 million in new loans, which was about triple what we did the year before. This year so far we've taken 30 million in applications, and we can't keep up with the demand. There is so much unmet need coming directly to us that we can't keep up with. So there's capital, but then it's also on the operating side. We need staff, because we want to make sure that our impact is deep, not just broad, and we need to make sure that we have, the right staff capacity to be able to properly meet the needs of our producers, because we don't want to do them a disservice and stuff.
And what's next for you? You have a new baby, I understand?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna as I've become a mom, I'm trying to be really intentional about the role model that I am, and my actions, and making sure that everything I do is something I would be proud to tell my daughter I did. You know what I mean? And I've been trying to be really intentional. So what's next for me is just to continue doing the good work that I get to do, not the good work I have to do, the good work I get to do, and just trying to leave the world a little bit of a better place than it was for her to grow and flourish in. So.
Well, Skya, thank you for being with us.
Yes,
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
David, it has been such a pleasure to share this space with you and to have these discussions on the Agents of Impact. I will be signing off, but I know that the work continues.
Well, Sherelle, we're so sorry to see you go on this podcast, but we're still going to see you in Impact Alpha, and particularly on the Plugged In calls you've been hosting on LinkedIn Live. So I know you've got a lot going on, and we're not going to let you get too far away. Please come back and join us on the podcast anytime.
Always. Thanks again.